Hey guys, thanks so much for tuning in to our Monday video. I'm going to start off where I left off last week, which was fleeing the scene of my mom trying to take me to detox and basically ending up running around Seattle by myself and getting picked up by a friend. So basically what happened after that is I ended up moving in with a really close friend of mine who was clean and sober, and she was trying to help me detox at her house, although I was still using off and on throughout that period, as I was waiting for a bed date and treatment. So eventually I got that bed date, and I went, I think it was maybe like a month or so after I'd moved in with her. And so I went to treatment. I went to a 28-day treatment and finished it. And there I met a guy that I ended up seeing afterwards for a few months. And that wasn't the best idea that I had ever had. So I ended up getting I left treatment after 28 days. It was Christmas Eve. And I was picked up by my family. We ended up going out to dinner and then going back to my grandparents' house and celebrating. And then right from there, I got picked up by this guy. And I ended up relapsing immediately that same night that I got out of rehab. And I ended up rolling around with him for, I believe it was at least a few months. And we were just back and forth using a lot of drugs, and I wasn't in a stable place, and I just immediately disappeared again from my family right after I'd gotten out of rehab. So eventually what had happened is I got into a really bad altercation with this guy, and he ended up beating me up pretty badly. We had been fighting. I was standing on my bed over him. He was on the floor. He pulled me down off the bed. I fell into my bedroom mirror, cut my hand, and then fell on the floor, and he proceeded to kick me a bunch of times. And it was a pretty ugly scene. Nothing like that had ever actually really happened to me before. And looking back on it now, it's just really interesting because it never even crossed my mind to ask anybody for help with that. I don't even think that I told hardly anybody that it even happened. I believe I told maybe one or two of my really close friends at the time, but I didn't tell my family, and it never crossed my mind to call the police or ask for any kind of help. And so it's kind of interesting to look and see where my mind was at back then, or at that point. I guess I don't know if it's that I didn't know how to ask for help or if I didn't think that I was worthy of help, but either way, I kept it to myself and moved on. And after this, I ended up being able to get back together with my daughter's dad and my daughter. They had been living with my mom, and he ended up moving out of my mom's home because she was moving out at the same time and getting a divorce and moving into her own place. So the three of us, my boyfriend, my daughter's dad, and then my daughter and I, ended up getting a place which was right down the street from where my mom was moving into her new home. So we were a little family again. I was thrilled about that, but my sobriety, I'd cleaned up a little bit for me to get to this point, maybe a couple of weeks, and that was short-lived. Immediately after we had gotten back together, I mean, within a month, we were both using together again. And I managed to put on a show for a while, and my mom even hired me at her weight loss clinic to work with her at this point. She wasn't aware that I had been using again. And so, as usual, my hiding my drug abuse was very short-lived, and shit ended up hitting the fan again, and that's where I'll kind of leave it off at this point. But thank you guys so much for listening. We love doing this, and my mom is up next with her perspective of this whole thing. Thanks so much. Bye.
Hi again. All right. So we left off on that fateful day where I picked Anna up at the no-tell motel and tried to get her into a rehab facility, and that had gone terribly wrong. After that, she ran away from my car that night, and I didn't see her again for at least a month or two. During that time, I think she was not interested in seeing me really, but also I had a lot going on. I opened up a weight loss clinic and got a divorce, and the boyfriend, father of my granddaughter, Anna's former boyfriend at that point, we'll call him the pseudo son-in-law from now on because that's really what he is to me. The pseudo son-in-law was in a very stable place, and he'd been living with us with my grandbaby, and they moved into their own place, and Anna ended up moving in with them. So that was really great. But prior to that, I didn't really have a lot of contact with her, as I said. She went to rehab. She went and did a second stint in rehab. And I remember feeling doubtful and probably even a bit ambivalent. I, of course, wanted to support her very much, but just, I don't know whether I was just so exhausted dealing with the fallout from her addiction at that point, or exhausted from just the emotional roller coaster and the emotional toll it was taking on my daughters and myself. I only went to visit her a couple of times in rehab. I wasn't really very supportive during that time. I didn't really feel like I had it in me. Not really proud of that now, but it's where I was, and it was real at the time. But then she was clean after going through quite a lot, it sounds like, but I didn't know that at the time. She was clean, and she and the baby and my pseudo son-in-law were all back together, and they moved into their own little place, which was just a couple miles from my place, which was great because we saw them all the time. Several nights a week they'd be there for dinner, and that was really neat. Anna even came to work with me part-time at the clinic, and she's so personable and talented that she did a good job, and that was really nice. It was great to be around them a lot, but things didn't seem quite right most of that time, so I guess I was a little wary too. But it was wonderful having her around and having her back around family, and honestly just knowing where she was every day was really, really important. And overall, for 6 months, 7 months it seemed like, but it was probably quite a bit less, things went really well until they didn't, and that's for next time. So thank you again very much for joining us on this journey and for your support, and we'll see you again.